It's good to have you here. Welcome to the Extracurricular. This is our third session of the day. We've had two chances to get this right already. So we have tuned this one a little bit. This will be fun. We'll have a dance-off. Okay, my name is Chuck Liddell. If you don't know who I am the CEO of an ISV. We have an integration app on the App Exchange. We're called Valence. I am a Salesforce certified instructor. I am an MVP, a user group leader, and I hold 22 certifications. I am your host today and one of the organizers, and I am very excited to bring this to you. This is definitely a bit of an experiment. You'll notice that the format is quite different. This is a 2-hour session that seems pretty lengthy, and I will explain why. But this is a chance to engage in a conversation in a way that you don't normally get to do in one of these talks. We don't really want to talk at you. We want to talk with you. So we have a lengthier session. A huge component of this is Q&A. This is about discussion. So we're going to have sort of a warm-up act here. We're going to have a few quick talks that are going to be a 5-minute demo of some cool things. And then after that, we're going to introduce our main speaker, our panel, and our moderator. So this will be about 30, 40 minutes of learning things, and then we'll engage with the panel, we'll do some Q&A. We're thinking of this as sort of a peer-to-peer learning forum, right? We want to go deep. We want to get into some technical stuff. I don't really care about the result of these projects that are going to be described to you. I don't care where they ended up. I care about how we got there. How did I learn the things I needed to know in order to get to my result? Where did I go wrong? What mistakes did I make? How did I correct those mistakes? Where did I get stuck? If you ask these speakers how long these things took to do, you'll hear 6 months, 9 months, forever. If I did it again today, it'd be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And what I want to do is, as a group, kind of tease out why it was 9 months the first time and it's 1 month if I did it again. What did they learn that they now know that shortened that timeline, and how can we get that out of their brains and into ours? Make sense? So who's worked on something difficult, just a difficult, tricky, technical problem before? Who wants to share one of those with me? Just a couple sentences. Don't be shy. All right. What'd you work on?
I was having trouble with, I was having race conditions in my lightning components. I was trying to change the state of two different ones at the same time. I had to figure out how to get one to communicate with the other so that I could do one thing and then the other thing without breaking my whole system.
So race conditions with lightning components, that's definitely a tricky problem. So we have some tricky problems here that we're going to talk about, and I hope that you really enjoy them, that you ask hard questions, you learn interesting things. My deepest desire is that your takeaway here today is that you have a spark lit inside you. You're excited about what you learned. You want to go explore more. And you got something really compelling. It's hard to learn by yourself at a certain level, right? Once you get to a certain level, just reading the documentation isn't enough anymore. And you need to have a conversation with someone. But if you don't know the people to have the conversation with, how do you have the conversation? So this is an experiment to see if we can get people that know a lot of stuff to have a conversation with a large group of people at the same time, and get the sort of benefits you would get by having sort of a smaller conversation with someone that had deep experience with something. So that's what the idea is here. It's entirely community built, community driven. These are community speakers. It's a lot of fun that we were able to participate in TDX, and I hope that you enjoy yourselves. Without further ado, I will bring up our first speaker, who is James Estevez. He will be a 5-minute quick talk speaker. No Q&A, just a cool thing that he worked on. He's going to demo it, and we'll applaud, and then we'll get into our next quick talk. Okay? Thank you very much.
Hello. Am I up? Okay. So for my quick talk, I decided I would try to write a SFDX plugin to document the lightning components in a particular project. Unfortunately, I didn't get too far, so I've got the script at this point, so we'll just run through that real quick, and I'll show you what it does. For our first component here, we have the map card component, part of the SFDX Dreamhouse example project that's on GitHub. And basically what it's going to do is just going to parse the XML in the component and then spit out a dot graph to visualize it. Let's see if this works. Okay, so that's the first one. Just gives us a simple graph. And then if we want to look at the project as a whole, and then go. We can see the entire component. If I can get a zoom in here. It's pretty busy, so you can see all of the built-ins, the lighting components, and force components, etc. So we can clean it up a little by removing some of them, adding them to the filter here. Sorry, I usually have my escape key here. Okay, and then just like this. So first we pull out the aura, not too much help. So we can just keep removing things until we get where we want. Okay. So we pull out the lighting components, and it's a bit better. And so we can basically see the dependencies between our custom components here. Right. We can pull out one more, which is force, which I don't think was. Head. Save. Okay. And that's it. It's not super complicated, but certainly didn't fill 5 minutes. The idea, of course, is to eventually, this is going to be built out into an SFDX plugin that should be able to pass in a component name or an array of component names and get information. The next steps would be to actually plug this into the plug this into the plugin framework, and also spit out stuff like your Aura attributes, whether or not they're required, stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's it. There are also there's a list of built-ins here, which will also be configurable. But yeah, I think that's it for me. All right. Thanks.
All right, thank you, James. Our next quick talk is Jurgis Salna. Come on up, Jurgis. So James and I were in the DX keynote yesterday. We were kind of laughing because I knew he was going to do this dependency graph talk about Lightning components, and we saw that dependency API get announced, and then Andy Fawcett did like a visualization of it. We're like, oh, hey, we could just get him down. Like, you don't have to do this anymore. But then James is actually, his is really sophisticated, so definitely check it out. He asked if anybody's interested in one of these. I said, are you kidding? No one has any idea what their Lightning components, how they depend on each other after they built them, right? I've got like 100 Lightning components, and how do they fit together? I don't know. So being able to graph that is amazing. So thank you for building that.
Hey everyone. Today I'm going to present a Lightning newsreader that you can do in just less than 99 lines. The basic architecture of this application is it runs on GCP. It just hosts actually. It just hosts a binary, index file on Google Compute Cloud, and that's behind Cloudflare DNS. It uses Lightning out to render the components which are exposed via community, and it uses no Apex and calls the APIs directly. So it uses a Hacker News as a backend. So Hacker News is a popular tech news website, and it uses an unofficial API that someone else thrown together, which doesn't require any authentication. the application you can see here, it shows 4 features. The first page, the landing page, you can jump to a second page. You can see the comments. I'll zoom out a bit. And you can see the user details if you click on the username. The basic boilerplate is just use your community endpoint. And this runs, by the way, for free on Dev machine on Dev Sandbox. And this is using Lightning Out. So this is just boilerplate stuff. The next one is your Hacker News app. Again, which just boilerplate should declare the dependency on the feed. And the feed is where it gets interesting. Once you got your data, you either render the list of the stories by iteration. Really simple here. Sorry. So we just iterate and display all the stories that are on the front page, or we show the details and the comments of the story. The application flow is controlled via the URL hashes. So you can see the user. The nice things about it, you can open a new tab, and you can share these. So whenever you land here, it's just going to automatically redirect you there. And this is done by a location change listener on the component. You got a handler, and that just parses the URL, does a request to the API, then parses the JSON, and then just sets the component variables. Nice, interesting thing here, it's using fetch API instead of XHRs, which is kind of a bit more lightweight. But that said, it doesn't support authentication in Lightning components, so this is more of just an example. So once we got this data, it comes in this kind of sort of threaded format. It doesn't go, the comment thread doesn't go forever like in Reddit's counting thread, but it's just comments that you want to indent, right? So what it does is just apply some extra padding, because we got this level parameter, and renders the body. But the interesting bit here, we can use recursive components. So this HN comments keeps rendering a new instance of the HN comments. This way we can get this type of easy way to build the table and easy way to thread see the comments. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jurgis. We have a bonus quick talk today for you. Dan Appelman, one of our panelists, is going to do a quick talk here on blockchain inside Apex. And if you're as curious as I am about how he did blockchain in Apex, then you're in for a treat. Just, don't farm for Bitcoins with Developer Edition orgs. I'll buy him some more time. So you may not have noticed, but Jurgis's app was using Lightning Out. Has anyone actually used Lightning Out in the real world yet? Yeah? You do it unauthenticated or authenticated? You do it inside Visualforce, so like inside your normal stack. Lightning components in Classic, so compatibility, you use Lightning Out in a Visualforce page. Does anybody use Lightning Out standalone? Oh, never mind.
You ready? So how many of you were at Mark and Parker's talk, the fireside chat? You might remember he promised by Dreamforce you'll see blockchain on the platform. Well, you don't have to wait till Dreamforce. You get to see it now. What we've got here is, I'm going to show it to you, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of code. This is a ledger entry, because a blockchain is just a ledger. It's just a list of entries that's immutable, a list of transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and create a very simple entry in this blockchain. And what I'm doing is I'm recording opportunities that are closed. So this will be the Trailhead DX opportunity. And let's say that it's $2,018. And now I'm going to save it. And you can see what it's done is it's basically filled out the various hash fields in the blockchain. So a blockchain, basically you have a hash of the current block, you have a hash of the transaction, that's the information about the opportunity, and you have a hash, a point back to the prior block. So at the same time as it did this, I have a group. Let's refresh this. So it posted information about this block right there to Chatter. That is representative of broadcasting it anywhere, platform events, email, whatever. The idea is you can share with the world the information about this block. Now, you notice that what you don't see in this transaction information is the transaction information. You don't see the name of the opportunity, you don't see the amount of the opportunity. And that's okay because you don't want to broadcast that to the world. All you want to broadcast is the transaction hash. And why you want to broadcast that is because now anybody at any time in the future can come back to you and say, hey, prove to me that you had an opportunity worth $2,018 on that date. And you can prove it absolutely without letting anyone into your Salesforce org, without worrying about whether someone tampered with data in your Salesforce org. You have absolute proof of that transaction, but you don't have to reveal the data about the transaction unless you need it. So the heart of what every blockchain is are hashes, and a hashing function is really, really simple in Apex. What you do is you take the data, in this case you take all of the source data and you build a long string. And then you take that string, you convert it into a blob. And a blob is sort of a large block of binary data that contains the string. And it's just a different format for the exact same data. Then we call the built-in crypto function to generate a digest, and that generates the hash value, which is also a blob, this block of binary data. And then we hash it, not hash it, then we encode it using the encoding util base64 encode. And what that does is it takes that binary data and it converts it into a string, which you can then store in a field. And that's where we got all of these different hash values. So this is a short talk. I can't show you much. If you're interested in learning more about this, you can go here. This is a link to my Pluralsight course where I teach you how to build a blockchain and give you all of the source code and so on. You can sign up there for a trial, or you can go to the Pluralsight booth over there, and they're giving out 30-day free trials for anybody who wants. And you can build your own blockchain in Salesforce, in Apex. It's really easy, it's really efficient, and for certain particular use cases, it is incredibly powerful because you can't normally do anything truly immutable in Salesforce because admins can potentially change anything. But using blockchain, you can create a true immutable, absolutely unchangeable record on the Salesforce database that if anybody changes anything, you know about it right away and you can fix it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. So you just heard Jurgis and James and Dan do some quick talks here. I have contact information on the screen for Jurgis and for James. If you have any questions about their talks, you can follow up with them, ask questions, offer to contribute if you want to participate in some of the stuff they're working on. So I'll give you a second to take a photo of those email addresses and names. Thank you all, our Quick Talk speakers. Excellent job. Awesome stuff. Allow me to introduce our main event here. So our speaker today is Matt Lacey. Matt Lacey started his professional career in game development on Nintendo handheld consoles. Come on down. He moved on to the Salesforce platform in 2009 and has been blogging since 2011. Matt has been a Salesforce MVP since 2012, and he proposed and currently moderates the Salesforce Stack Exchange. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
Our moderator today is John DeSantiago, here to my left. He's a consultant with shellblack.com, has been providing architecture and custom solutions for the Salesforce Lightning platform for over 13 years. He is a Salesforce MVP and co-host of the Good Day Sir podcast. Our illustrious panel, across from me, we have Sarah Morgan Nettles on my left. She began her career as a .NET developer, but discovered Salesforce through a client in 2011 and fell in love with the platform. She has earned not only the Advanced Developer certification, but the Platform 1 and 2 certs as well. Up until last year, she has worked as a Salesforce developer consultant, supporting a wide variety of clients, and also is the author of 3 courses about Lightning development that you can find on Pluralsight. She now has her dream job, working with a small group at Salesforce to deliver the hands-on challenges that you complete on Trailhead. Welcome, Sarah. And finally, Dan Appelman, our second panelist. Dan is a Salesforce MVP, the author of Advanced Apex Programming, webmaster of SearchTheForce.com, and co-founder and CTO at Full Circle Insights, a Salesforce ISV partner. He is also the author of Salesforce-related courses on Pluralsight, including his most recent, Building an Enterprise Private Blockchain on Salesforce. Welcome, Dan. I leave you in the hands of this incredibly well-credentialed and expert panel group. Off you go.
Cool. Thank you, Chuck. And I just want to start by saying thank you to both Chuck and everybody else involved in the Extracurricular for putting this on. It's quite cool to have a conference within a conference with a different format, a bit more of a focus on technical challenges and stories. It's been driven primarily by the Good Day Sir Army community. As Chuck mentioned, we've got John here as one of the co-hosts, and Jeremy is at the back there. If you don't listen to their podcast, you really should, especially if you want an honest view on a lot of the platform. And you should also listen to the Code Coverage podcast, which I co-host. To call us sporadic would be very, very generous. So, episodes come occasionally on that, but they're a lot more regular than us and well worth listening to. I'm also going to say I haven't got any notes for this talk today. I put them in a draft blog post on my blog. Went to get them this morning, and turns out DigitalOcean has rebooted that whole sort of setup. And so far, my droplet hasn't come back up, which means I configured something wrong. I thought I'd log in through their UI. I couldn't SSH. I went to log in through their UI. Haven't been in through that in a couple of years. Couldn't remember the password. No worries, I'll reset the password. Guess which server I've since configured to be the email router for the email address I used on the password reset. Right. So yeah, my blog will be up again at some point, but I have no idea when. So Chuck, if you see any big holes in this from the dry runs, just pull me up on it and flag it. That said, if panel have any questions, if anyone else has any questions as I'm going along, just butt in. That's completely fine and welcome. If I think it's going to take a little while to answer, maybe I'll push it back towards the end. But otherwise, I'm going to rattle through for about 20 minutes now. Probably confuse you a bit because there's no Lightning on display here, no Apex on display either, actually. So not much platform stuff. But I do believe all of this is relevant to those of us developing on the platform, especially as we push into this new world of Lightning. So yeah, I develop an OEM application for luxury retail stores. It's an application that store associates use on the shop floor. And it's a hybrid mobile application in a way. It's really a JavaScript single-page application hosted inside a static resource. There's a 20-line Visualforce page or thereabouts that contains everything, but everything else is in the static resource. And the whole UI, everything is built with a library called Knockout.js. Is anyone familiar with Knockout here? Very few people. So a few years ago when I started, it was one of the next big things. It was doing quite well. I still really like it. It's not broken, so I still use it. I have no good reason to jump onto the latest thing. I think part of this, there seems to be a resurgence in imposter syndrome. So many people think they're not developers because they're not using the latest JavaScript libraries these days. And seriously, who is? The people who write those libraries, and that's about it. Nobody is moving and changing their code base every 3 months. It just doesn't happen. So Knockout works for me. It works really well, and it stays out of my way. And the version I'm on is about 2.5 years old at present. I haven't needed anything that it doesn't do. I have zero problems with it. So Knockout essentially just lets you bind data between JavaScript and HTML and facilitates two-way bindings. It's pretty unopinionated. You can architect everything else how you want. But one thing it does do is let you define components. And I think everybody here is going to be familiar with the concept of components. Like we have Lightning components. Visualforce has components that everybody tries to avoid because they have their own set of fun that comes along with them. But Knockout lets me do components. My laptop just went to sleep. 2 seconds. Oh. There we go. And so this is the contents of one of my components. Might make this a little bigger. Yep. And this is like the sort of client's component in my application. It's a pretty high-level component within there. But you can see it's mostly just HTML. I just want to call out a few bits so you can see them more easily. Your blue pen. So there's a client search component at the top here, which I've crossed out rather than underlined. Client profile component. There's a tab bar component here. And then at the end here, I've got this. This is kind of like a dynamic component. It sort of gets worked out on the fly. You can see it's got this sort of component binding which Knockout defines, and there's a name driven by a variable in the controller for this component. Just going to talk a little bit how this works, just to give you a grounding, and because it exemplifies as well one of the main forms of communication we have components, and this is common to Lightning as well. So this is clients. Inside we've got the tab bar component. I'm going to clear this one. And in the middle here, what did that do? Let's draw a new sketch. So the tab bar, it's got these parameters that get passed in. These are pretty much like the parameters we use with Lightning components, where you can send information down to another component. So here's some data you can render. This one's sending in like the current tab. But this also acts as a feedback mechanism. And inside the tab bar, which hopefully you can guess is a bar of tabs, when you click on one of the other tabs, it actually updates that same binding. So that communicates back to the client's thing that the view has changed. So we've got clients at the top here. We've got a tab bar component here. And then this sort of dynamic current section. We'll call it current section there. So initially, different color. Initially, the client's thing says, hey, this is the selected tab. Just when it's rendering the screen initially, it defaults to one that the user has access to. If someone clicks on a tab, the tab bar component updates that same binding, letting the client's component know that something's been clicked. In turn, that changes this current section, which is updating this other component. And that's one form of sort of component communication, and that's something we see in Lightning when we have these sort of very small hierarchies, and probably is going to be the first sense of communication you come across between components. And that's all sort of well and good, but at some point, you're going to have more components, and then more and more and more. And you end up with sort of much larger hierarchies. I'll draw an orange this time. And it'll take a while to get there, but at some point, you'll end up with trees that look something like this. And you get to the point where something on one side of the tree, say this guy here, needs to talk to this one over here. And like the use case I came across where this was starting to get a bit funky primarily was I had a task list on the screen. On the tab bar, I'd also expose, though, for the tasks tab, the number of incomplete tasks that are within that. And you may think, well, they're both task things, they should be related probably in one component, but that's not how you build a UI. Like they're in very different parts of the tree. And so when a task, maybe this one here is the task list, this is an individual task with a checkbox in it. When that gets marked off, not only does the list need to know which is right above it, and that can happen quite easily, but somehow you need to update this count way over here. I started looking into mechanisms for doing this in Knockout in particular, and the first thing I found was this a standard solution was called Knockout Postbox. This is pretty much the same thing as Lightning events, right? You've probably come across this as you start doing Lightning development. They say, if you need to talk to another component, you send events. And it's all based on sort of pub sub. It's like, it's standard object-oriented stuff from the 90s when you had these hierarchies of classes in object-oriented programming, and you're like, this class over here needs to tell this one over here to do something. And it works pretty well. I mean, one of the biggest features of it is complete separation of concerns, and you've got no solid binding between components. I'm going to take it back to my games history here. Like, somewhere I've seen this work really, really well is within game engines. And game engines are written for different hardware, but they break down into a bunch of different subsystems. You have like one engine running all your gameplay, which is pretty much the state of your application. You have another engine that deals with graphics hardware, another engine deals with sound hardware, and you may have a few other bits for like file input, output, saving, that kind of thing. But say you've got a platform game, you're running along, you drop off, and down a hole, you're dead. What you don't really want is the gameplay engine saying, OK, sound manager, play this sound. Because then if you ever need to replace the sound manager, it's a lot of hard work. Those things are tightly coupled. And replacing sound manager, like Salesforce kind of stuff, I've noticed we don't tend to replace big systems and move things around a lot. But with games, they get moved between platforms. And it would be pretty standard. The gameplay engine would stay the same because it's still the same game. But there is a completely different sound engine on the other side. And so if you use this kind of messaging there, it works really well. Like the player dies, all the gameplay engine does is send a message up saying the player is dead. Every other system that needs to take action then can respond to that. So the sound engine goes, oh, I've received the player is dead, I'll play this particular sound effect. And it completely cuts sort of the boundaries between the two and separates your concerns nicely. Now that's the biggest benefit of this kind of messaging and using these Lightning events, is that you do get this good separation of concerns. It also turns out to be the biggest weakness. Because once you start getting up to these rather large hierarchies, and just delete some of these lines, things will blow up on you pretty quickly when you get up to this kind of, well, maybe bigger than scale, but you'll get there really quickly if you're sort of breaking down things nicely. So you might have a component over here, and this publishes, say, events A, B, and C. And maybe this one responds to C, and this one maybe responds to B. Maybe this one here responds to B and C. In turn, it publishes D, and then D comes in over here, and that might publish A as a result. And it gets very, very messy very quickly. And the problem with this as well is you can't reason, like this stuff is invisible. Now we've seen tools for showing you where your components have references to each other. It's hard enough just to see all that. There is no visualization. This is entirely invisible to you. And I think that as people build big hierarchies with Lightning components, they'll start to hit this issue where you can't reason about your code anymore because you're reading something, you see an event kicked off, but you don't know that that's triggering 10 different things in 10 different places, which are then triggering other things. Like it's just not there. You can't just read the code and pass and tell exactly what's happening. I'll give you an example. Like part of our code still uses these because I tend to replace things as I go. Like if it's working, I won't touch it until I need to go in there, and then I'll update it to use my newer methodologies. But that's a screenshot, not my code, which I can't type. Right, shortcut bug. OK. So if I open, we've got one called leaderboard.js here. And if I search for publish in here, sorry, wrong key, publish, you can see it's using this postbox thing I talked about. It's publishing a text string and providing value. And that's basically the same thing as a Lightning event. It's saying, hey, this has changed. And it publishes another one here saying a row has been clicked on the table. And this also publishes that. So there's multiple places where these events are being fired. And the only way I can find out what's picking those up is to literally run a search on the code base for the same string and then try and work out from there exactly what the code flow is. And it gets, like I say, it's very hard to work out the process. Dan?
So just so that I understand the scope of the problem, not only is it hard to visualize what's happening, the order, but am I correct in saying that the order would be indeterminate? In other words, between one execution and the other, you might get completely different ordering depending on the timing or the...
Yeah, I mean, we heard about race conditions here earlier as well. Like, it's a very real thing that it gets out of control on you.
So it's undebuggable.
Yes. And it gets further complicated. I found out there was another major issue I was having, again, where I had a bunch of components in a hierarchy like this, and something would change over in this one. Let's choose a different color. And this one over here, hey, orange. Thank you. This one over here would need to know about it. But because of the way like an app works, like not everything is on screen at the same time. And a lot of times, this whole chunk of the hierarchy, it wouldn't be on the screen. It wouldn't receive those events. It wouldn't know it needed to update anything. When it came back visible again, it would still be showing the old data. And then you can sort of work out from there that things are going to get pretty out of sync pretty quickly across your UI. And then this was a major problem for me, this tracking where all these events were going and getting around this particular problem. Like I was up to about 70 components in this application, and I was getting real major headaches. But it turns out I wasn't the only one. So we're going to shoot off on a little tangent now. Around about this point in the development cycle, we were looking at building another application as well that was going to be mobile again. And I started looking at React Native just because I wanted to have better performance out of things. Anyone here familiar with React Native? Familiar with React? Quite a few. So it's yet another JavaScript framework for doing all this. React Native is just one that, instead of rendering an HTML model, actually generates native iOS or Android elements on the fly, give you a nice smooth UI. But what I quickly learned was you can't look up anything on the internet about React without discovering something called Redux. Has anyone heard of Redux? I know Mike has, but... so yeah, there's a thing called Redux. And Redux itself is a library written by a guy called Dan Abramov, who's now at Facebook for writing it, pretty much. And Redux is based on a Salesforce, been around too, a Facebook methodology called Flux. Flux is just like an architecture, it's an idea, and it's a way of managing state in a single-page application. Redux is a specific implementation of it that happens to be really cool and had a bunch of extra cool features. But yeah, so I got to this point and started learning about this. While I was trying to do a React Native application, I was like, well, I'll use Redux and learn about this idea of flow. And there's pretty simple diagrams here, but the idea is you have your app state in one place, and your components and things are basically a view of that app state. And the idea is, especially with Redux, it should be a pure function. Like for any given state, your app will look like one particular thing. There's no discrepancies there. It's completely deterministic. And to change the state, rather than just passing messages around willy-nilly, you fire up things called actions, which are the start of the flow there. They get handled by a dispatcher. They, in turn, update the state, and then the state trickles back down. And the core concept is this sort of unidirectional data flow, that nothing sends things up to the state. It just dispatches actions, and they have known effects on the state, and the state cascades down through your components. And this got me to thinking. I suddenly thought this could actually solve a lot of the problems that I was having with Knockout. I didn't really want to go in there wholesale, rip out everything I'd done. Like I said, that's why I still have some PubSub stuff knocking around. And I didn't want to use Redux itself, because it's designed, I mean, you can use it outside of React, but it's kind of designed to work with it. I didn't want to be shoehorning things together. But the biggest takeaway I just took from this, and which is what I want everyone here to take away today, is that when we get into components, we start having component state, and we have state for each of them all over the place. The biggest takeaway I got from all of this was the core is your application only has one state, though, and it doesn't need to be spread out amongst all these components. It's more effective if you keep all the state in one place. Like, components may have their own state about what color they are, or if they're fading, or if they're animating. But the actual core state of your application, like which clients are selected, what has been loaded, what did the user last look at, there's only like one instance of that. It's like this big global thing that exists. And it turns out global variables are good. You can use them for something. I actually don't have problems with global variables. I like them, but I know a lot of people are completely anti them. And so, yeah, I took that idea and I was like, well, I wonder how I can use this within my own stuff. And so naturally, I created a component and called it app state. And pretty much, I'm going to skip over the top bit because there's a few experiments in there, but it's a JavaScript object, and it breaks down into modules that relate to different sections of our application. So there's a bit for the client search screen, remembering which view they were on last and which filters are being selected. There's a big bit for the email thing, because we send emails out and have this whole template engine, and this bit's still pretty complicated and confusing me at times. But there's more simple things as well, like the state of the cart, what items are in the cart. Collections is something else, collections of products on our application. There's the catalog, it's what was the search query the user last used, what item is currently selected. And now anything inside of my application that, come back, wait. So yeah, anything in the application that needs to know what the currently selected product is, it just needs to include this app state module, and it's right there. Like, it doesn't need to receive messages from anywhere or anything else. And because of how Knockout works with all these observables, I don't do the whole action thing. I literally just update these. Anything else that's using them will automatically get those updates. But the key thing is I just have this one component called app state. I can include that anywhere, and I can access it and change it from anywhere, and everything else automatically knows about it. And bringing it together into that central store is what makes all the difference for me. And it's made my life a lot easier, which is why I kind of wanted to do this talk today. And so yeah, I think, like I say, big takeaway, you're going to be building Lightning, you'll start using events, that's great. Once you get up to like 50, 60 components, it's going to start getting hairy. There's like literally no two ways about it. It starts getting hairy and messy. And that's why Facebook came up with Flux. And the example I used with the task list and a counter is pretty much exactly the same issue that they were having, because they do sit in different parts of the AI, and there's this big tree in between. And yeah, it just gets really messy and confusing. Sarah?
One of the biggest things, the challenges, I think, with React applications and why Redux was introduced is the concept, and one of the big things with Redux is immutability. And how are you handling immutability in your application?
So like I said, I don't really have to worry about the mutability so much with Knockout because it uses these dynamic bindings. So if I update part of it, everything else gets it instantly. And it's, as Sarah was saying, so Redux, I said earlier, is a specific implementation of Flux. And one of the coolest things it does is the state is a JavaScript object, and it can't be changed. What you do is you dispatch actions, they go through dispatches. They actually copy the whole state and then update the relevant part on the new copy. And the cool thing about that is you've basically got this serializable object. You can reload that state at any given time and get your application back to exactly where it was. And their debug tools are super powerful. Like if you've used them, you'd actually be a bit jealous that you can't do this on Lightning. Like you click around the application, you'll see this series of states flying up the debug console. And you're like, oh, I shouldn't have clicked those last 5 things. You can just scroll back through, click on the state, and it'll reload that one, and you immediately jump back to where you were. Which is even more powerful when you sort of think about the idea, if you could send this app out to users, they could hit a problem, send you a bug report that just serializes that JSON structure and sends it to you. You could load that in and be in exactly the same state they were in before things went wrong for them.
So I'm also curious, what was your primary motivator for making these changes? Was it that your original application was having bugs, or was it performance that you were?
Well, like I said, we didn't have the ability to edit what we represent as clients or customers in our application for the longest time, so most of it was all right. As soon as I did add the ability to edit, suddenly everything that was rendering a customer would be out of date when you updated it. And I had to start subscribing to these events all over the place, and some would update, some wouldn't. If they were on screen or not would affect it. I tried caching in a bit of a dumb object, but then I didn't know when the cache had to be invalidated. And I was seeing too many bugs, and it was taking too much of my time trying to fix them. Yeah, and I got lucky. Like I happened to do this React Native stuff and tripped over Flux in the process, and was like, I don't need my state spread out. I can actually pull it together into one big object, because there is only one state for the application.
Okay, so I can intuitively understand how the various components having a centralized state can read at any time they need to display their content.
Yep.
But let's say something is on screen, the state's changed. What is the connection that causes that component to realize it has to update itself?
Well, like I said, I haven't done this in Lightning. This in Knockout, it's sort of taken care for me, because it has this dynamic binding. But you know, with Lightning, anytime you sort of change an attribute, then that automatically gets reflected and recalculated, right? So one way to do it is if you pass that state down as a parameter through every component you had in your hierarchy, you would get that. It's gone to sleep again. You get that action happening for free for you. There is a guy called Mark Masterson, who I keep thinking that's my code window. It's not. Not that one. That was me checking DigitalOcean, seeing where my server was. So he did talk at Dreamforce, I think it was last year. I haven't got a link to this, because literally all you need to type into Google is Lightning and Redux, and you will find this as the first result. And he's done an implementation of Redux for Lightning, trying to solve these problems. So you'd find an answer there specifically for Lightning. Like the approach I said, where you pass it down through attributes all the way down the hierarchy, like my one concern there would be that any trivial change would result in these like cascading effects, and you'd probably have some performance issues. So I think it's going to depend on the JavaScript framework in play, but because we have a completely bespoke UI, I don't use Lightning for it. And because I started when Lightning was just launched and didn't really want to touch it at that point. But yeah, Mark actually, he'll mention the talk, I'm sure, on GitHub under MadMax983. He's got his code for this as well, so it's worth getting there to grab. And we also got Mike sat in the crowd. Can I just mention Mike quickly? Yeah. Did you do a talk on this as well, on using Redux and Lightning? You did, right? Okay. What Mike said there was he did something more generic, similar to me, and put unidirectional data flow into a Lightning application. And like I say, I think everyone's going to hit this point at some point. You just have so many components, you're like, I don't understand. And that is why this talk was called, Why Did That Do That? Because I kick off a message over here, and suddenly something else has changed, and I have no idea why anymore, and can't even work out what caused that to happen. You need to control it. Pull it into one place, and you're much better. John, did you have a question?
I just wanted to see if it was a good opportunity for us to kind of start opening it up for
Yeah,
questions,
absolutely.
Q&A, get the audience involved. We have a mic here for questions. The panelists will continue to ask questions. If you have any questions, anything small, big that pops
We
up.
really want to hear from you guys.
Exactly.
We wanna hear what kind of experiences you have. Yeah.
So feel free to use this mic here, or I'm going to run around. If you feel more comfortable sitting and asking a question, just raise your hand and I'll run over.
And don't be afraid to ask stupid or basic questions. I got to tell you, I sort of know some of the stuff, and I had a hard time following it too. So please ask questions.
All right, Matt, I'll start off here.
Stupid questions are just part of development anyway, right?
All right, essentially what you're saying here
Is that my...
Yeah,
There you go.
okay, sorry.
Thanks, Cal.
Essentially, yeah, I'll bend over for this. Essentially what we're saying here is that you're talking about the opposite of bubbling from what I'm hearing. And it almost sounds as if you're talking about something akin to a factory pattern, although I recognize that it's not.
Yep.
But you're storing this state, and you're consuming more memory in doing this.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So what is that doing to your application, and how did that impact things?
In terms of performance?
In terms of, well, I was actually very cautious about all this to start with. Like, again, with my background, like I worked on the Nintendo DS for a while. It has 4 megs of RAM. Part of Nintendo's soak test you're putting a game through QA is it has to be left for 4 days, going in and out of demo mode, and it can't crash. If you leak 1 byte of memory in that time, it's going to crash. And so I'm very conscious about these things. But I sort of looked at the performance, I measured it, and looked at memory usage, and it really, in terms of everything else that's loaded, in terms of the browser and everything else, like the overhead is so minimal these days that you can't get away with it. Like, to all intents and purposes, like memory and processor speed, like, they're pretty much infinite these days for a lot of these use cases. Like, we're not challenging the hardware in the slightest. And I'm not a fan of that because it does result in sloppy thing. Like, I was anti-Slack for the longest time because it was taking up 4 gigs of RAM just to provide what IRC could do in like 20 megs. It's just, yeah. But yeah, in terms of performance, I didn't really see any major overheads. In terms of my sanity and saving me time, massive overheads. So, massive improvements, I should say. Sorry.
Yes, I had a question about the lingering components after you use a couple of them back and forth, say like 40 or 50, and you have events flying. Is there a way that we can destroy them, like component destroy method or something like that?
I don't know for Lightning.
What's the question?
Can you destroy components that
are lingering, like when you have multiple components after executing a couple of calls or executing the application, could you destroy them?
Well, you can have dynamic Lightning components, and you can just remove them. I think maybe that's what you're asking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can do that. Yes.
I think that's similar to the setup I mentioned where mine, like, I take some bit off screen, like you select the tab and other stuff would disappear. And like I said, that stuff wasn't in memory then and wasn't rendered, but then it wouldn't receive events either, and that caused me issues. But
So one thing I've found when I make my own bespoke solutions based on, a general idea like Flux is sometimes by the end of them, I'm seeing all the community that gets behind something like Redux with things like all the middlewares and stuff like that.
Yep.
How are you feeling about that right now after you ported and kind of made your own Flux framework?
How do I feel about what, sorry?
How do you feel about your app? Do you feel like you made the right decision, the right call for what you were doing?
Well, I do, because like I say, I've been on the same version of that framework for 2 and a bit years, and it just hasn't let me down in that time. I think I've had like one minor bug in it at some point. And there is like the main guy who developed it has gone off and doing something else, but there is a community building up to release a new version.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's hard to avoid being sucked in. Sorry, those are my motorbike friends. I did put that on sleep mode, but yeah, no, it's hard not to get sucked in by these big communities and see, like I say, the fashion in JavaScript changes all the time, and frankly quite ridiculous. Like, a lot of people feel like if I'm not using React or I'm not doing this, then I'm not a developer, and it's just rubbish. Like, that's not the case.
So do you think that your more knockout-based Flux implementation could make more sense for more knockout users?
I think it probably could. I don't know if there's many users left, and they've probably all done this themselves. But yeah, I've been perfectly happy with it, and it's still working for me. And the other thing with getting involved in things that are very dynamic and changing is, like, more than once I've had my build pipeline fail because someone's updated a repository somewhere else, and something's got included and broken my build. And when I'm trying to get features out to fix client issues, the last thing I need is like Jenkins complaining because someone else somewhere on the internet has broken it. Incidentally, apparently that's what happened. Didn't we get to the DX keynote at lunchtime yesterday, the 12 o'clock one? Where part of the demo just didn't work. And apparently it was exactly the same thing. It was some remote requirement, and someone changed something somewhere in the world and broke Dave's demo when he needed it most.
So Matt, I'm curious about the application, the actual application that you're using,
Yep.
and also your users. What kind of application is it again? You didn't really describe that. And who are their users? Are they mobile users primarily?
It's primarily iPad, some mobile, and yeah, it's shop floor assistance. If you come into a store and you buy a jacket, instead of getting a generic email from marketing list the following week, you get an email from the person on the shop floor who served you. But so that's why we don't use Lightning. It's why we don't use Salesforce One, because it's an application for store associates. Like, we don't want it to look like enterprise. It's got to fit in luxury retail space, and it's got to be as simple as possible for them to do and streamline their tasks.
What kind of users are you getting in terms of demand, in terms of scalability, and for your application?
Well, our largest client had about 300 users on it. Unfortunately, they went to administration last year and nearly took us with them. We got out of that. We've got about 12, 13 different clients in terms of brands using it at the moment.
And have you had any issues with performance of the application?
No, not at all.
That hasn't been an issue?
No.
That's good.
Not until Apple released iOS 11, and the change they made broke our current build as well. So
did it?
It did.
Okay.
I had a question about how your initialization works with this application.
What, sorry?
Your initialization with this application. Are you pulling everything into this like stateful container first and propagating it down? Or are you kind of getting everything and then informing the...
Yeah, it starts off pretty empty. So the default state, I mean, you could pre-populate some of this stuff, but it starts off basically empty. Like, there's no selected client, no recent clients or anything. And some of the initial screens that users mostly use are like task list and stuff, and that's not in the app state yet. But yeah, typically when a component pulls information from Salesforce, then it will shove it in there if it's something that does need to be made available elsewhere. Some components are still just self-contained things. They grab some data from Salesforce when they're viewed, and nothing else needs to know about it. I haven't changed those yet, but you can definitely pre-initialize. You could fill like all the state up with some, your initial state, should you so want.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm wondering, one of the challenges I find of picking a library that can achieve certain amounts of functionality for you is not knowing in advance necessarily the foibles you'll find later on.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, what's the furthest you've gone down the path of using a library before you sort of found buyer's remorse over it and you're like, I really wish I was using something other than this? Or you found another one and then switched and had to completely port code over to use the other one instead?
Before I started using Knockout a few years ago, I played around with Ember quite a bit, and I quite liked Ember. And I did that for a few days, and then I played with Angular for a bit. And I found Angular too opinionated, and there was too much stuff you had to learn at once. But well, I try and... Sorry? It was Angular 1. Okay. It was the original. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, that is a very opinionated library. But I did... I like trying to use things for like a decent period. Like, I'll spend a week experimenting with something, rather than just going off what I find online. And Knockout is very, very simple. Like, it has these sort of data binding things. It's just got observables and a controller, and that says this thing creates a two-way binding, basically. But you can see, like here, it's like, there's an if, oh, I'm not in the drawing mode. That wasn't going to work. Hey. Oh, sorry. Pull that up. Come here. Got it. So this data bind, that's like the only attribute you ever need to learn for Knockout. And then it has a bunch of different values you can put in here. And like, this is if. And it's like, if there's a client selected and we're not showing search, then render everything else inside of here. Like, that's pretty much the extent of Knockout. It's very lightweight and leaves all the routing, everything else, it leaves it up to you. And I quite like that because you go into some of these libraries where they do say, oh, you should be using this for routing and this for state management. It can get pretty hairy and there's a lot to learn in a go. And like you say, you don't know what you're going to trip over. I haven't really tripped over anything with Knockout because it's so lightweight and left the rest up to me. And that took away a lot of that burden. But yeah, I'm going through the same thing with Salesforce IDEs at the moment. Like everybody else under the sun, I was using Maven's Mate for years. It's been getting worse and worse and worse. Now it's not supported, like getting more and more errors. And I'm trying to spend at least a month or 2 months at a time trying different IDEs before I make a choice. Some of them I can rule out after 2 days, but others, it takes a little longer. Cool, thank you.
Hi. If we want to implement this unidirectional data flow pattern in our Lightning components, is the Lightning Redux repo that you were showing in your browser, is that the example to follow?
It seems to be. I mean, it hasn't been updated for quite a while now, for like 6 months or so. Like nobody's really made a single there's no like single community effort that I've come across yet. And I think it's because it's early days. Like most of us who've built any kind of Lightning application, we still have reasonably small hierarchies of components. And like I say, it wasn't until I got into like 40, 50, 60 components is when I really started to struggle with the sort of messaging and the events. And so, yeah, so far, nobody seems to have settled that. I think it'd be a good starting point. Looks like Mike, the blonde guy who's up his left, his name's Mike Tetlow. I would chat to him. He's done a lot of it, and he's a very smart dude as well. But I think we're at a prime time now where we can work together as a community to start building this, because I think it'll save a lot of pain for everyone.
Thanks.
So I can see this is really great as long as the state container holds distinct elements of data that aren't dependent on each other or necessarily relate to each other. What about situations where you can have invalid states, right? Where you have a particular piece of data has a certain value, then there are only certain other allowed values for other data. Dependencies.
I think that's more of just a JavaScript in general issue, though, where we don't have like a compiler checking stuff for us, and we don't have strict typing and so on. Like, I think even any kind of JavaScript framework or things, you're going to start seeing issues like that, where something can get set wrong and you can't fix it. But at least you only have like one state, and if the state's wrong, you know that part's wrong. Hopefully you can just react to that and fix it somehow.
But you didn't run into this particular scenario in your app?
No, not really. I mean, one thing I did do, which I'm still undecided on, I said it was as an experiment at the top of my app state. So you can see I've got like this client section. There's like a selected client. There's a selected client's ID, just because I got fed up of dereferencing this object to get the ID, and a recent client's array. And this subscription here isn't a pub/sub subscription stuff. It's subscribing to changes in that selected client, and it's actually setting the selected client ID for me and maintaining a list of the previous 3 clients. So I still don't know if I like this approach or not. Like, it's handling just my recent clients list in my UI, and it's working quite well for that. So you can have things that respond to the state and manipulate other parts of it on the fly, but I don't know if I'm going to keep this particular model yet. Yeah, I would love to see a full Redux immutable state, so you just get this sort of time scale of them going out in Lightning, because, yeah, if you've played with it and tried it, it is just mind-boggling, like how fast you can develop on that, and you're like, something's gone wrong, and like, click back here, let's do the same actions. You can replay those actions as many times as you like. No, it's going to go exactly the same way, and it gives you that many times to debug it. You never have to restart the application and navigate all the way back through to where you were. You're like, no, I'll just jump back 3 steps, and you're there. So.
I'm curious about testing. What kind of testing frameworks have you used? Any?
Not on this. There was one available for the sort of work with knockout components, but not extensive. And again, I find at this kind of scale, like, there's not much to do on the per component level in this. Like, a lot of them are pretty simple and just maybe manipulating a tiny part of data to be displayed. And so like, I kind of need more like integration level tests. But nearly all of these components need to talk to Salesforce to get data anyway, and don't do much other than display that data. So I tend to rely on testing that interface thoroughly and making sure that all the data is coming in okay. And generally anything in the front end, I don't feel like I need the JavaScript test, because if I'm making...
Not using Jasmine or anything like
No, because typically if I'm making changes in component, I'm testing that as I go, and
that. Manually testing it.
it's pretty clear. It's usually pretty clear when something breaks, because as soon as one binding fails in Knockout, they all fail for the rest of the page. So, you break one and suddenly the page goes blank. I'm like, okay, I've done something. So.
Right. Okay. Just curious.
Cool. Is anyone else? I'm curious. Is anyone in the audience tried any of these concepts with Lightning? Has anyone come across it? Has anyone hit these issues with just events going everywhere? You have? Good. Tell us. I want to hear about it.
I don't know, just like what you're talking about. You end up with just these laundry lists of components and events and firing different things. And I went that route for a while, and then I backpedaled and experimented with just binding my attributes down all the way, down the whole stack of components.
Yeah.
And then saw performance things, and it's
Do you
just
have a
it's
SPA
just a big challenge.
Is it a SPA application that you have? Okay.
Yeah, it's just a main container with a few different applications within it that they would interact with, and it was just hard to manage.
Yeah. And did that work? Did that solve a lot of the problems?
Still work in progress.
Still work in progress?
Yeah.
Something I'm concerned about is like the introduction of platform events. I'm sure people have heard about, which is sort of this pub sub at like the whole Salesforce level and potentially between other systems. And again, those should be decoupled, so decoupling is good there. But I don't even know, how do you reason about things at that point? I have no idea.
We also use. Stay standing.
Do it.
We also encounter problems with the event thing. Like I was tasked with fixing a bug, and we have a little bit of legacy code in our app, and it's just a bunch of nested components. And you click something. You click something in one top component, and way 5 levels down deep, something throws an event. And
See, why did that do that?
yeah, exactly. So it took a while to figure out what was causing this change.
Yeah.
When you say legacy code, what do you mean by legacy code?
Legacy code as in like this code was written right when Lightning was introduced.
I see. Okay, so it's some of the earlier stuff that might not be using some of the later components, and it might have problems, and you're having problems with that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like we hadn't established best practices at that time.
Are y'all using any base Lightning components, anything like that?
Yeah, we definitely are.
You are? Okay. Yeah. How about LDS? Are you using any of that stuff?
We are trying to do that. We actually were asking a few other people because we were having problems where we have our S-object schema is not in the best organized state. So we have a translation layer from our S-object schema to a view model, and to decouple the S-object schema from our markup. And so with that, we lose we can't use LDS. We lose all those advantages.
But with LDS, you got the caching. Are you also, you can use set storable without LDS. Have y'all done any caching, anything like that?
Yeah, we have tried. We have done set storable for requesting icons from Apex. I don't know if that really worked for us. We had to we still have to research if it's actually working. It was kind of hard to experiment with.
You can't use it in a standalone app. It has to be, you have to be like in a Lightning Experience app. Like if you try to use it from a standalone app, you'll have a problem. I know that's one issue, that it's not really well known so much.
Yeah, that's actually something recently that we just realized. It was working for
a lot
us.
of people,
Yeah, we were trying out LDS in our Lightning components, and then we
it's
realized
not working, and it's like, no, it's just in a standalone app. It's just you haven't put it in the right container.
Yeah, for some reason it was working in our Lightning components inside Visualforce, and then later on we found out that it's not supported in Lightning Out. So for some reason it works, but
yes, there are areas where it's not. But it's really good. LDS is I encourage you, if you have the opportunity to go back to it and use it. There's a lot of advantages to it in terms of the caching, in terms of the performance that you're going to get. It's really, and it just simplifies things. It really does. And so I think it's worth investigating if you have that opportunity.
Yeah, we're definitely going to try to embrace it.
We have potlucks before our all-nighters, and I don't know, things like that just really got me.
I'm still in shock that we're referring to something just like a year old as legacy.
Oh, good point. Exactly.
Question over here.
Yeah, I've got a question. Kind of on the topic of spas, and something I'm struggling with myself is how to. Can you guys hear me? Good?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So like on the topic of spas, and something I'm struggling with myself is how to best encapsulate reusable code, and whether that's referencing static resources or what's becoming known as service components, or within a component you use your same kind of utilities. And
When you say spas, do you mean in Lightning applications?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Sorry, specific to Lightning development.
Okay. Are you using Aura methods?
Yeah, and so that would be the idea with the service component, where I would just call the methods on it. I'm finding a lot of the things that I'm reusing is JavaScript specific, and so sometimes it's easier for me to just maintain one static resource that does all my error handling, for instance, and I can update it there, or if it's something specific to a page, maybe it's better suited to a component. But I was just curious if you guys or other people in the audience have experienced this type of thing.
And I think with the reusability, one of the issues there is in testing, because it can really help, especially if you are using a testing framework like Jasmine. And I wonder if anybody out there has tried to use any of those testing frameworks with their JavaScript and Lightning applications, and what kind of challenges they faced, or are they just doing kind of what Matt's doing and just manually testing? Are y'all doing that?
Yeah, we just recently implemented Lightning testing service in our app.
Yes. Good. And what do you think?
The examples aren't exactly what we were looking for.
Okay.
The examples were testing the public API of a component. What we wanted to test was the internals of a component. Make sure that on button click that we do the proper business logic in the proper order. And with Lightning testing service, at least with the examples given, they are testing an Aura method, and then they inspect the attributes, the public attributes of that component to see how did the state change. So what I came up with was a interface, Aura interface, to expose the helper of our components. And so then we can just unit test a particular helper method and then mock out any other helper method it calls, and make sure that the logic, we can just test the logic in one helper method and ignore everything else going on.
Is this an application that you're still developing and it hasn't been released yet? I kind of get that feeling, like you're still developing it and it's not in production?
It's in progress right now. Yeah, it's draw loop, Nintex DocGen. Yeah, so we're iterating on it right now.
Yeah.
We open it. I have a question if no one does. Oh, no, we do.
Oh, there you go.
Hi.
Intercepted.
Yeah. I'm interested if I have any options around bookmarking my app so that I can save the state and potentially return to it later. Do I have any options? Can you talk to how I might approach that?
That's where, if we can get a community-driven or a definitive version of Redux for Lightning, you'd gain that ability straight away, because, like I say, that state is an object that changes over time, and it's just several copies of it. You never change it. You just copy it and then change it. If we can get a version of Redux that works well for Lightning, then you should be able to do exactly that. It's literally a case of saving that JSON object out as a string and then reloading it later, and everything else will take care of itself if we get it all plumbed up right. But yeah, I think there needs to be a concerted community effort to get this kind of thing written. So yeah, there's the one by Mark that's online. That's probably a good starting point. But I think we just need people who actually need that functionality. That's when we'll start to see the solutions. I think, like I say, it's still early days to see. Not many people have tried it yet, and the efforts have been sort of staggered and spread around the world. Nobody's really tried to do it together, and I I think that's what we need to get over that hurdle.
And have we seen any examples where the community have overcome that challenge before, and what would need to happen in order to drive that?
Well, there's this guy here. Sorry, I didn't catch your name, but I don't think you were serializing out, were you? You can't serialize. You just did the sort of the flow down, and there we go.
Was that the question earlier about the Aura-enabled methods returning? And
Well, Kerry was asking, she wants to like serialize that state. So you said you do the state flowing down through the components.
Yeah.
Does that mean, like, could you take that state that's at the top and write that out, store it somewhere, and then reload it again?
I mean, I don't see why not. Like, just have an array of objects that is the state.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder how the URL changes in Summer affect that. Like, what kind of stuff can I do with the URL in Lightning?
I don't know. I've got 2 old App Exchange apps I need to update for that, which is really inconvenient right now.
Does anybody have an answer for that? Can I inject state into the URL in Lightning? I like save a token for a state or something, or some sort of ID? No, I can't. I have no control over the URL. So how would you bookmark state? You can't. You learned that here.
Well, I don't know if that's even. Well, it kind of leads up to my other question, my question that I was going to ask. But the impact of caching in Lightning and how that affects your state management.
Like I say, ours is hosted in a Visualforce page, so I don't have to worry about it. But not my problem.
But just as a general topic.
I don't know. I've had enough trouble with Lightning just trying to get my components to update when I've changed the code. Like, I used to have to reload that page like 10 times. And
You know about the setting.
but it all got fast. Yeah, but it didn't work. And
It didn't work?
it all got faster last year. Like, was it summer, spring made everything like considerably quicker? But when I first, you can invalidate the cache. Yeah. You can add it.
There's a Chrome plugin called Clear Cache.
Oh, okay.
And you just push the button.
Yeah, I think one of my guys found that. Like, yeah, when I first tried writing some Lightning components, like, yeah, in Australia in particular, you hit refresh, it was a full 30-second reload every time. So that's kind of why I probably started this in Knockout, not Lightning.
Yeah, but there is a setting for that you can change, and
Yeah.
you can turn that caching off when you're doing your development,
Okay.
and then of course you want to turn it back
Yeah.
on when you're in production.
But then it will be on in production, and then we will, yeah. All I could think of would be using, like, some kind of cache buster or something, if you can have some other parameter in there that tells you just to ignore the state. But again, it depends if you're in control of all the data services and what's actually pulling data into the app as well.
Yeah, I was researching that, and I did notice that there was a way to invalidate the cache, but I wasn't exactly sure how architecturally where that would fit in.
Yeah, I'm not sure for Lightning.
I think it's something new coming out. I haven't gotten into it too
Yeah.
much more.
I feel like a lot of us are going to run into these issues over the next 12 months. Like, Lightning adoption is going up, and more of us are having to write Lightning stuff. So I think a lot of these problems are going to start surfacing more and more frequently from here on in.
So there's one thing that you can actually save some state inside the helper. And one place to look at this is this library called Lax. It's a very nice helper to work with server events, with Apex, and with LDS. And generally, the way it works, you can declare a variable similar to the way you declare a function in a helper. So, foo colon object comma, and then you can access that from a controller. You can set the state there, and that's how the library uses it. So if you read the source code of the library, you'll understand it. Thanks.
What's that called again?
Lax, L-A-X.
LEX?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's tried, but I mean, I think we talked about that on the Good Day So Slack maybe at some point. Like, once I played with this stuff, I did try to see if I could hang like a random JavaScript object off of a Lightning controller, because that's an object itself, and it wouldn't let me. But you can just put random stuff on the helper. So you can abuse that a little bit and just have a JavaScript object where you don't need to define a million XML attributes. But yeah, I only started playing. I didn't really get it too far along.
Any other questions? Oh, great.
So the setting to disable caching, disable JavaScript caching. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, you may make a change in your JavaScript, you refresh the page, and the thing you're expecting doesn't happen. You inspect the source code, and the JavaScript is still the old version. There's a security setting under setup to change that. You can also source control that in your project config, in your config project scratch def JSON if you're using SFDX. That org preference is called S1 encrypted storage pref 2. Yeah, try Googling that. Or just we can show you the screenshot. Just make sure that's in the disabled, and then anytime you use scratch orgs, JavaScript caching will be disabled.
That's a great tip, actually, because that was a real pain for SFDX people that first started working with that, is that they were having that problem, and they were having to go in there and manually do it every time they spun up a scratch org, which is like a lot. And so it's nice that you have that setting. They just exposed that in the last, I think, release, that they put out that what you're talking about, that attribute, which is awesome. So good tip. I'm glad you brought that up.
Thanks.
Still open for questions? Anybody? I guess I'll ask another question.
Looks like a wrap.
No, I got more questions.
You got questions? Go on.
So I guess how do I frame this? Where would you start with this? So I think one of the things that I struggle with when I'm trying to start a project is, when do I start looking for something like React, Redux, or something like that? At what point do I say, I've started this, it's starting to evolve, it's getting kind of big and ugly, and how should I start that process?
I think, like, if I was going to build something and I knew it was only going to have 10 components and it was pretty well scoped and wasn't going to grow, I probably wouldn't bother with any of this, and I would just chuck a few events around. If you didn't really know, though, and you felt like, if it's typical client work where just the scope just keeps creeping and creeping forever, then yeah, as soon as I felt like I was getting a little bit hairy, I'd be like, that'd be the time to like make those changes. And the sooner you sort of, you usually lose a bit of time at that point, and you have to explain why you spent 2 weeks working, and to the client, it's like just back to exactly where it was 2 weeks prior, maybe with a few extra bugs thrown in, but you got to take that hit at some point, and I find that the earlier you do that, like the better off you are. Like, I had the same thing when I put a CI system in place. I had spent 2 days getting Jenkins working, getting all my build working, but I'm glad, because I did that about 2 years ago, and I've saved probably weeks at this point in not having to do deployments myself. So
do you think it would be considered pre-optimization if you kind of designed your components with a baseline that you feel like you can transition to something like this, or do you feel that's just not time worth spent?
I would say yes, but I'm very much in the acne side of things, that you aren't going to need it. I try very hard not to make things too generic and too general, because I found anytime you try and plan for the future and you make something really generic, it still turns out that the way you need to make it generic was actually slightly different, and you end up rewriting all that or throwing it away anyway. So, and like I say, that's why I still have some old code in there, passing events and things. Like, until I need to change those screens, I'm going to leave them alone. When I need to change them, I'll probably update them then and do it. But I try and minimize the amount of work I'm doing at any given time, just to minimize the changes to the code base and try and avoid any bugs.
I know if anybody's interested in Redux and learning more about it, one great resource that I found was egghead.io. They have a free course out there on Redux that was done by Dan Abramoff, the creator of it. And he does a really good job of walking you through it and explaining the whole concept of the state, and it's a good resource. So if you're curious about this and wanting to implement it, especially if you want to do this in a Lightning component, I would definitely suggest that you go check out that course, because it's free. Why not?
And along the lines of your question, there is a reasonably famous now Stack Overflow post where someone said, I'm learning React, why do I need to do Redux? And he responded to it, and there's like this 5-page essay as an answer on there saying,
seen that,
don't use it unless you need it, and he just gives you a whole screen information why you shouldn't use the thing that he wrote. Yes. It's quite impressive.
He does. He has a course. He's a very humble guy.
Yes, he
is. He's kind of cool.
I'm waiting to see if there are questions. I have a tangent I want to take us on. that involves the whiteboard. So, does anybody have any questions before I take us on a wild goose chase? All right. I'd like some help designing something. So we have this problem in Lightning apps right now, and if you haven't run across it, we're talking about it right now. You may not realize we're talking about it, but once I have a lot of components in my hierarchy, attribute binding becomes a really awkward way to do state management. And Matt talked about some really cool ways to do state management in other systems that aren't necessarily available to us in Lightning. So if these are Lightning components in my hierarchy, and I want to share state down here all the way to my leaf that is at the top, I have a couple choices. I can use events. Usually events are kind of up, right? I can bubble a component event up. If I want to push state down, I end up defining an attribute here, and here, and here, and here. I actually only care about it at the top and down here, but it's defined it everywhere in the middle just to be a pass-through. So I can bind it down, bind it down, bind it down. And that's really irritating because in any sort of complex hierarchy, you end up with these intermediary components that have like 5 attributes they care about and 25 attributes they're just passing along somewhere down the or up the chain. So if I had like a real state store somewhere that I could serialize a state, kind of like we were talking about earlier, and kind of go back to it, what we're missing is the ability to have sort of a state elsewhere that this guy can grab, and then this guy can grab it too. But it's sort of independent of the container hierarchy. I don't know how to solve this right now.
I've got an idea.
I'd love to hear
it. It might be invalid. And like I say, I haven't done a lot of Lightning, so it might not work. But
talk to me.
Draw it. You can have a component in Lightning which doesn't have UI, right?
Yeah.
You just include it somewhere. So that would be. So we could have that. And
like a service component, you would call it.
There you go, service component. And we would call it our state. And then we got a hierarchy. Drawing mine's slightly different to Chuck's, but whatever. Each of these is only going to care about like a certain part of the state. Like, you know, we might have pieces A, B, and C over here. Maybe this is A, this is going to use A, this will use A and B, and maybe this one uses C, I don't know. So this could be the state, right? They could store everything in like one object, or you know, an object with properties, which we'd call A, B, and C. What if when these get initialized, you kick out an event saying, get state for A or something. And this responds to that, and it sends out an event saying state A has been updated or whatever. These could listen to just the ones they want to get that update. I do feel like you could get into a few loops here, which would get a bit hectic.
Would you carry the state in the event? Is that what you're thinking?
You send it back. Send that part. I want this part of the state. Send that little bit to me.
Yeah, when you do that, though, aren't you sending that event to the entire window?
You'd be sending it.
I think that's what Chuck is concerned about, is that you're trying to minimize what's going outside the components and not involving everything in the DOM.
But these could only listen for state events on the bit they care about. And the only thing that listens to the get ones would be this one component. Do you feel like that would work? I don't know. I haven't done enough Lightning to know.
Because I believe what we're trying to do here, or what you're asking about, is how to keep it within the Lightning components container. Is that the gist of where you were going?
So I'm a pragmatist. I don't really care where this stuff lives, but I prefer it to be native. Attributes are not the right place for this, but I don't really have any other place to store state. Jurgis mentioned helpers. I could use local storage, right? But it's kind of funky. Maybe if I had a service component with no UI, and then it was backed by local storage, and then that service component essentially was the way I interacted with local storage, and I could serialize state and get it back out somehow. Yeah. If I standardize that and I could get at it from any component, like it was a global service component, kind of like Lightning Data Store, or like application state. Maybe. I think this is a gap in the framework, and I'm not sure how to solve it at scale.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, with application component or application events, which is generally what you do, those are very heavy in terms of performance because there's so much that's going across. If you pull up Lightning Inspector when you have components and you're using application events, you can like look in Lightning Inspector and you can see how many lightning events are firing, and it's incredible. I mean, it's like boom, 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 boom when you do anything. And you can imagine the overhead that's adding to your application. And so they tell you to use component events, but then at the same time, you're limited by how far you can go with those and how they communicate, because you're just dealing with bubbling at that point. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. You need that flexibility, but as a trade-off for that, you lose the performance. So it's a very slippery slope. And I think it's a bit of it's lacking there in Lightning.
So I reckon we scrap this one then.
I was just listening to this and just wanted to ask if you guys have considered like a BFF framework, back end for front end.
I'm sorry, say it again?
It's called BFF, back end for front end.
I haven't seen that.
Concept that's become a popular architecture for reducing the number of microservices calls.
Okay,
from
I think I know what you're talking about, right.
You basically have a back end whose job it is to coordinate all that.
Right.
And then all the calls are happening inside your server rather than from client to server.
Is this
the client's
something you're
overwhelmed
using?
by just so many. Yeah. I mean, I'm using it elsewhere, but not with Salesforce. It's an Angular application, but you were talking about SPAs, and I'm like, it's kind of the same thing we're doing, but I don't know how to do it in Salesforce. I hadn't even thought about it. But when you talked about that problem of all of those calls, that's exactly what we wanted to deal with and reduce the impact on the browser, basically.
And that was your solution?
Yeah, and it's been a popular one elsewhere. It's become a common architecture.
Yeah, that's something to look into. Thank you for telling us about that.
Going off what he was saying, we do something similar like that in our Lightning architecture, where our top component will have one of their attributes will be all of its nested components, and then we have some sort of interface that we've extended that when we want to do something like saving it or getting state from the server down to the client, it will just iteratively call through all of those nested components saying, hey, do all of your saving, do all of your loading, whatever you need to do, and then we'll kind of boxcar that all up together and push that all up to the server, and so that way we don't have to have a call out from every single nested component up to the top to get to the state. You get this nice little handling everything on one side before you have to push everything up, and avoid these really expensive, really performance degrading server-side calls.
And that's something homegrown that you created yourself, your own interface, essentially?
Yeah.
And it's in JavaScript?
Yep.
Just like a plain old JavaScript object?
Yep, pretty much.
Or interface, yeah. Okay. And that's performance-wise, it's working well for you, and it's consistent, you're not having problems, it's not buggy, anything like that?
Well, I mean, it's definitely buggy, but it's definitely improved performance, limiting those number of calls. And we've just made it a framework, and then we just extend this.
Do you have it on GitHub?
Not yet, but
You need to put it on GitHub.
We're planning on that, of making it more open source, but it's pretty messy right now, and it's evolved from doing one thing that was supposed to do, then we were like, oh, this is nice to extend all of our Lightning components using.
I encourage you to write an article about it, because the process of writing an article about something like that will actually force you to think about all sorts of aspects, like what if we had to do this? And if I'm explaining this to somebody, then I have to think about certain aspects of it, and so it can cause you to kind of realize a lot of areas that you weren't thinking about. So I would encourage you to try to maybe do that. I don't know if you do any authoring. Do you blog or anything like that?
Not particularly.
You should.
Okay.
You should share. You can do it. Yeah, just start out. These are my thoughts about the challenge that I am facing, and this is what I have. I mean, you spin up a WordPress blog. Anybody can do that for free. It doesn't take any money, and it just takes a little bit of your time. And the process of actually writing down what you're thinking about and talking it through like you're explaining to something will make it more clear to you. Kind of like, the concept of putting a rubber ducky on your desk and explaining something to the rubber ducky. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I get it. it makes more sense. Well, the same thing happens when you try to write about something because you're trying to communicate something to somebody else. And in that process, it's actually becoming clearer to you what you're trying to teach. And it also makes things kind of unfold. So I think you would do well with it. I encourage all of you to share your ideas. Get out there, post on Stack Overflow, write your own blogs. I mean, do things like that. Share, like Matt was talking about. That's what the community needs, right? We need more people experimenting with these things. Somebody go out, pull down Mark Masterson's library, try to implement it yourself. See what doesn't work, and then write about it and tell us what didn't work, what did work. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. We have to make mistakes, unfortunately, to grow, to get better. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are scared to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, I started my blog as a place just to make notes ready and for problems, and you come back and use it. But even I had one scenario a couple of years back where I got stuck on something. I Googled it, I ended up on the Salesforce Stack Exchange, found an answer on there, which then referenced one of my own blog posts.
Great. That is
it's like
great.
it's easy to make the same mistake more than once, that's for sure.
So I have a question. Maybe someone knows how to disable action box carrying. So action box carrying is sort of built-in bulkification of Apex method calls in Lightning. So what happens if you fire 3 requests at once, it will just kind of bundle up. The problem is if you do a DML and then do a callout, you're going to hit a governor limit. So one way I found to do this is using set timeout and kind of decouple some different event loop. But it's kind of a dirty hack, and I'm not even sure if that's going to be working in the future.
Say that again. What is your solution? I didn't quite catch that.
Set timeout.
Okay.
You run another function.
Okay. Set timeout.
Yeah. There is this other flag. It's called set background on the action. But that's kind of a different intention of it. It's for long-running requests or something. That does decouple, but doesn't work reliably. So, yeah, the problem with box carrying, you are subject to the governor limits, even though you usually think it's different transactions, but actually it's bulked up in one.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Have you written about that anywhere?
I did see this problem before. Someone asked, and there was no good answer. I didn't want to provide this answer because I'm not sure it's actually really a good one. But that works for now, but I think we need a different solution.
Right, I understand.
Well, here's one idea that I have that possibly might solve what we're talking about. The financial force libraries come to mind in that they use a class to define an application. Possibly something similar along those lines you could use in a Lightning component where you create a component that defines your application and all the components that are part of your application. Andy does that for his selector classes, his domain classes, his unit of work, and a whole bunch of other things that he's added in his second edition. In fact, he's got a whole series
Enterprise patterns.
in his enterprise patterns.
Right,
Yes,
right.
And that's what we're talking about is architecture of enterprise patterns. Only we're talking about a single page enterprise, I guess, in a sense. But really, we're talking about these types of things, and perhaps some type of class along those lines might be one way of solving it.
Well, Andy's working for Salesforce now.
Yeah, I know.
You know that? He started working for Salesforce in January.
Yeah.
And I know he's doing some serious work, and he's got a lot of stuff going on right now.
He's
I can tell you,
guy.
he is brilliant. He really is. And I know he's pushing for a lot of stuff. So I think there's going, in the near-term future, you're going to see a lot of changes coming out. And a lot of it's driven from him and his ideas. And that may be one of them, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
To address the question about the DML and web callout problem, we also face the same thing. we had to come up with a workaround where we had to reorganize the flow of our code, where starting at Aura-enabled method, that would be like our composition route. We wrapped all the logic calling in a try-catch, and then we appended a finally. So we would do try-catch finally, and inside that finally block, that's where we do our DML. And so that's kind of the workaround that we came up with. But
that makes sense.
Yeah. Having multiple callouts from Lightning to Apex, and having a DML in between two web callouts, we haven't figured that out. And also, it's funny that we, looking at the whiteboard, we have this basically the same drawing on our whiteboard back at the office. We have this relationship diagram of nested components, and we're trying to figure out how can we pass the data through without re-rendering the entire diagram, because re-rendering it all, it takes so much time. We haven't figured it out yet. We have some ideas, using the provider pattern. We thought maybe having a provider component in every single component. Another thing that makes it more complex is that each node of that graph is actually one component that we created. We have like a recursive definition of this diagram, so that's kind of difficult, and we're hoping that maybe there's some other people that maybe have solved this problem.
What's the company you work for?
Nintex.
Nintex, okay. How many developers do y'all have? Quite a bit, I imagine, huh?
We have 3 Salesforce developers on the package team, and 1 manager for that. And we have about the same size for our server team.
We're getting close to the end of our time here, so if you do have a question or you want to contribute, time to show up. You've been holding back. This is your chance. I do have one more question. I'll buy you some time to make your decision if you're really going to do it. So part of state management is exchanging information with other components, other parts of my state. Maybe we have some information we share, like the account we're talking about. But another part of it is sharing information with myself later in time. One thing that I would love to do in Lightning, but seems almost impossible, is to essentially jump somewhere else in my state. Like if I get an alert saying, hey, this thing over here exploded, click here to go inspect it. It'd be nice to, no matter where I am right now, jump to a completely arbitrary state in my application to show something that is temporal, sensitive to time, to the user. That seems really tricky. And then also sort of even just managing components at a high level, like I said, like a card layout of like showing different types of components that don't know about each other in advance. It's hard to architect sort of agnostic structures of just windowing the right set of panels and stuff that aren't really codependent markup-wise. So if anybody wants to talk about either one of those, I'd be super interested in what you have to say.
Well, I think Sarah would agree with me here that the first one, again, a proper Redux implementation.
Like if I really had Redux.
You could do that. You could literally write a whole new state in that is, we're in alert mode, show this box.
And just
you could just replace the state object, and because everything else is a function of the state, UUI would change like that, you'd have the new thing. And then you could reload your previous state to go exactly back to where you were as well.
The problem with this, we don't have a way to deep clone the objects.
Yeah.
And if you have quite a big state and you try to serialize and deserialize, that will be slow. So if that would be nice to have in Lightning in the helpers.
Over here.
I would say to go with that question, I think it might be a hole in the platform, but there's not really an offering that deals with client-side routing. He says he wants to go someplace else in the app to deal with an alert or some kind of message, but there's no really concept of a page for our single-page applications. I'm not sure if that was covered earlier, but if there could be some way to encapsulate pages of components, maybe with each individual page having their own state, that could really be a benefit to the platform. So a routing library of sorts. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I was going with that is, as I've started to build this stuff at scale, things that I would expect to have, routing, URL-based deep linking, state management, they just don't exist. And I can't even find patterns out there that people are describing like in blogs about how to do this stuff at scale. So I mean, at a component level, I completely understand how to work with components, but at an enterprise pattern level, I think we're missing a lot of pieces still. Either they're not possible, or people just haven't figured out how to do them yet, and the patterns haven't been figured out.
You've got a great mentor.
Okay. Any last call? Last call here. Have we all enjoyed this? It's been really interesting, right? Thank you, speakers. You guys did a great job. I have some extracurricular buttons. Anybody like swag? I have some buttons. You can come grab a button.
With your little ET characters. They're so cute. I like them. Did you draw these yourself?
We had them done by a designer
okay.
that
They're
supported
cute.
us. Well, thank you very much for coming. This was an experiment. Thank you for experimenting with us. I would love to have feedback, so please, if you didn't like something, if you like something, let us know so we can improve and iterate in the future. Very happy you're here. Thank you for sticking it out to the very bitter end. Come get your reward button, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
We'll get a round of applause for Chuck.